Welcome back. Thanks for joining us on another review. Today we have the Storm Journey. If you like what we do, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and check us out on Patreon. First impressions, the Storm Journey is another mid-late ball from Storm. I hate to sound unexcited, but Storm really fills this category like crazy. Alright, let's start with the normal. You should know by now that we always start off resurfacing every Reactigloss finish ball to 1000 grit hard on spinner, followed by step 2 compound, and light scuff by hand with 3000 Abralon. Alright, so we threw this ball before we really knew about it. I didn't see any write-ups or even info on Storm's website, so we got to test it without any preconceptions other than it's a mixed blue, shiny, symmetric ball. With that said, let me just address the ball makeup first, now that we know what it is. F8 core, or Fate core, is what was on the previous Belmo ball, the Fate. And that used the Rex Pearl cover. It was clean and quick transitioning. It's what I call the fairly thin ball reaction, meaning it almost looks like 2 phases, even though, of course, we know there are 3. It goes from kind of skid to roll fairly quickly, meaning the hook phase feels very short. That is fairly typical of mid-late ball that you'd want to use as the lanes break down or you have lots of friction. The Journey now adds a new TX16 in Pearl version. So TX16 solid is what's on the Phase 2. Phase 2 people. So, of course, there's a bit of marketing at play here. In the end, though, the initial testing uncovers a pretty squarely mid-late ball. Let's say it is, definitely less ball than the TNT Infused we just tested, but a bit more than the Fate. The Infused is more rolly in that you definitely see the middle roll phase. The Fate was a bit more skid flip. The Journey kind of straddles the middle of those. As you would expect, it's a little sensitive for a fresh shot or early in the block. It's definitely more for when the lanes break down. I'd love to say it would mimic the Phase 2 look, but on broken down lanes. But I honestly can't say that for sure. I'd have to see it way longer to feel like it gives something more than any other than mid-late ball Storm has available. I feel like it's encroaching on the Revenant territory in the bag. I'll say I did like the way this ball shaped from more direct, even though it was capable of opening up the lanes. If I can play it like a control ball, even while being a more angular reaction, this could be something more special than I think. But I do need more time with it. I'd likely scuff it a little harder with 3000 by hand to smooth it out more, to use it that way. Next up is Tyler. You can watch the video to see the reaction, and it's pretty typical mid-late shape out of the Journey for him as well. It's got the long and mostly late type of reaction. It's, I would say, speed sensitive given how angular it can be. And as it is, it can be, I don't know, maybe what we call feast or famine shape. It reminds me of a typical skid flip shape that either destroys the pocket or leaves you a big split. Again, I think that's why it's better off on more broken down or more breakdown, where lane friction calms the break a bit and you get to take advantage of a more controlled angularity, if that makes sense. This ball can definitely be manipulated by hand positions quite easily, and that may be good or bad depending on the bowler. For average Joes, it might feel release sensitive, and since we aren't all that great at consistent releases, could create some inconsistent ball reaction as well. For more advanced or pro bowlers, they'll be able to manipulate the shot quite a bit as needed. Now, Bryan had a little bit of a different story, and this is where you get to see the effect from different styles. As you would expect, the ball is more archy for him in general. I feel like the Journey's pretty typical mid-late ball reaction for Bryan, though. And what is that? Well, it's obviously clean. He can stay relatively close to the friction, but in a way, he kind of has to. The reason is that if it's too strong and he has to open up, mid-late balls don't usually read the inside friction. So the ball kind of floats a bit if you are in. What we saw was there were a couple shots that really jumped off the friction, but he couldn't really consistently reproduce that. He had to move a little away from the friction or move the break point in to get the ball to the pocket. And when he did, you did see the transition to roll, but didn't really drive through the pins. He came in light a ton. However, he also struck a ton. So somehow, even with the light hit that didn't really drive through the pins, it seemed to impart enough energy to get the pins to fall over. This was interesting, but most bowlers who If you saw a ball reaction like this, where it's not driving through the pins, even if you struck, you might eventually try something else rather than continue with that ball reaction. Luckily, in testing, we stick with it, and it did keep striking. All this said, by now it's clear the journey is a mid-late ball. I have to admit that tossing it and then finding out it's TX16 gives me some interest to try it a bit more to see if there's a possibility to get a cleaner phase 2 type reaction later in the block. Previously, the awesome velocity core and other covers, and I'm not sure they ever truly represented what I would call a quote cleaner phase 2. So I'm intrigued to play with the journey more to see if formulating the cover stock with TX16 is the better way to finally get that.